Chapter 28. Chloe's POV. I've found that I've been able to feel a lot more comfortable around Nico since he has begun to let me sleep with him. And that really didn't help for when he left me in the room alone. If anything, it just made me feel more nervous. It was like he had become my safe haven, at least, that's what it felt like. And I'm pretty sure that he has come to notice it as well. I looked up at him as he exited the closet from my place on his bed. I could tell that his stress had grown in the past couple of days, yet I still didn't know why. I'm guessing that it partially had to do with his work, but it felt like that wasn't the only reason. Part of me just hoped that none of it was my fault. Nico slowly made his way towards the bed, his eyes showing that he was deep in thought. His eyes met mine for a brief moment before he laid himself stomach down on the bed. He stretched his arms forward before relaxing them with a very long exhale. I wondered why he opted to lay on his arms instead of the pillow. My eyes quickly glanced out the window. The sun had just barely set, yet he already looked exhausted. But if I had to guess, he wasn't done with his work yet. He probably just needed a break, not that I could blame him. I looked over his body, noticing that he wasn't full relaxing. "You're so tense," I said softly, causing him to turn his head towards me. "Yay," he began casually, "that tends to happen from time to time." My eyes furrowed as I continued to look him over. It didn't really suit him. Part of it even reminded me of myself when I was in the pet shop, so uptight and worried about what was going to happen. I could try to work some of it out if you'd like," I offered. Nico rose a brow. "You mean like a massage?" I nodded. He just continued to stare at me for a moment. "You know how to do that?" he asked, seeming partially surprised through his still casual tone. "Well, yes, to a certain extent," I started. My father would often come home from work stressed, so I found myself giving him a massage at least once a week. My mother and sister would ask for them sometimes too, just because they said that it felt good. I don't remember it being too difficult, so it should be easy to do again. Nico's brows drew together. "It sounds like they used you," he said. I was slightly shocked by his words. I never really thought about it like that, and it really didn't seem like that. I was just doing something nice for them. Despite that, I just gave a small shrug. "It made them feel better, so I didn't really mind," I replied. He looked at me for a minute longer, supposedly thinking over my proposition. "Well, if you want to do it then I won't stop you," he said, pushing himself up a bit. "How should I lay?" "How you are now is fine." He still kept himself up, his eyes shifting to his shoulders. "Should I take off my shirt?" "Yes." With that, Nico continued to push himself up until he was sitting on his knees. I couldn't help but watch as he grabbed the back of his shirt and pulled it over his head, tossing it over towards the closet once it was off. I bit down on the inside of my lip to stop myself from doing something stupid while Nico returned to how he was before. He looked at me as if to say, "What now?" as he rested his head on his arms. "Right." I took a silent deep breath before I crawled over to him, mentally preparing myself for what I was about to do. I stopped once I got right beside him, noticing how he was just casually watching me. "If I do something that you don't like, just tell me and I'll stop," I said. I'm sure that he already knew that, but I just wanted to make sure. He just gave me a partial nod in return. I looked away from his face and to his back, suddenly feeling a bit nervous. Still, I positioned myself so that I was on top of him, making sure that my knees were on the bed as I straddled his lower back. Luckily, Nico didn't seem to mind that. A blush crawled across the bridge of my nose and cheeks as I stared down at. Chapter 29. Chloe's POV. The dining room was more crowded than I remember it being. Even so, I was still partially happy that Nico decided to take me with him today. He was right about the blood moon stressing the vampires out. I could see it on most of their faces. I could even tell that it was quieter than usual, like everyone could feel the weird tension in the air as they chatted amongst themselves. Today was not a day that really anyone enjoyed. Even the pets and slaves were more tense than usual, most of them probably wondering if they were ever going to see another sunrise. I slowly took a deep breath, trying in vain to relax against Nico. I even wondered myself how this night was going to go. Probably everyone was wondering how this night was going to go. All except a couple who were just treating this like every other day. One of those people being the vampire beside us. Nico had made sure to have me sit more to the left, keeping me as far away from Xander as he could. Xander had noticed it as well, and as far as I could tell, he found it quite amusing. I glanced over at Doe. She hadn't made a move to look at either me or Nico. She even seemed to look a bit more uptight ever since we arrived. I really felt bad for her for what happened, and part of me wanted to apologize to her for it. A soft sigh escaped my lips as I looked away from her. I tried not to focus on that and instead try and eat some more of my own food. Eating was the last thing on my mind, even though I knew that I should eat. Who knows, maybe it could work in my favor tonight. How the hell are you so calm about this? Nico asked, looking over towards Xander. Xander just rose a brow with a small grin, like his question was ridiculous. It's not like we haven't done this hundreds of times before. He responded, plus Doe has lived through 6 of these, so I'm pretty sure that she can do it again. Nico just continued to look at him like he was insane as Doe's eyes grew ever wider. The amount of confidence that Xander held about this thing was almost amazing. I was even more amazed that he had owned Doe for that long, and even more surprised that he even kept her alive for that long. He always seemed like the kind that would go through pets every other month. What about you, Nico? You seem a bit bothered. He said, his smirk growing ever so much. Nico's eyes narrowed into a glare, his grip tightening on me ever so slightly. Xander caught on, but somehow decided that continuing to talk would be a good idea. Ooh, I think I know what this is about, he said, smiling contemptuously. You think you know a lot of things, Nico responded. Xander hummed, obviously enjoying his response. That's true, but hey, sometimes I actually turn out to be right. His lips curled up, like right now. Nico leaned back, taking a sip from the blood in his glass. Is that so? He questioned. Xander's brows rose, his face full of pure confidence. Are you trying to tell me that you're not worried that the same thing that happened to your last pet will happen again? I flinched as Nico slammed his glass onto the table, catching the attention of some of the vampires around us. Shut up, he hissed through clenched teeth. I could tell that his body had tensed, then again it could have been mine. Part of it was most definitely me. And now I most definitely did not want to finish my food. Ah, would you look at that? I was right. Xander chimed. I said shut up. I could feel a growl begin to rumble in his chest, making me even more nervous. If he was worried about something that happened in the past, it just made me want to know what happened. And if it involved his last pet, then it definitely was going to involve me at some point. I shifted uncomfortably, doubts wasting no time showing themselves. Listen dude, I can't blame you for feeling that way. All I'm trying to say is worrying about it isn't going to anything. Even if it did, it's not like we can really control what happens tonight anyways. Nico just continued to glare at him. Not all of us can. Chapter 30. A.N. Ah, you lovelies and your burning hatred for Xander. It's amazing really. The moon had risen. Its deep red color filled the sky not too long ago and I could already see a difference in Nico. I watched nervously from the couch, holding a pillow against my body as Nico quickly paced around the room with his gaze glued to the floor. Nico had told me to stay there and to stay quiet, so that's exactly what I was doing. The first effects of the blood moon were already beginning to show themselves. His breathing was rigid and heavy, and although I couldn't get a good look at his face, I was pretty sure that his pupils had turned to slits. I was too afraid to make any kind of noise. I knew that their mindsets changed as they did during this night and pretty much only focused on their bloodlust and the pain that they felt because of it. I noticed how Nico's hands were shaking even after he had balled them into fists. This morning's conversation kept creeping back to me as my worries grew and grew. Something happened to his last pet during the last blood moon. I could give a pretty good guess as to what happened, but Nico was very upset once Xander brought it up. Which made me even more nervous. Nico stopped in the middle of the room facing away from me, his body trembling as he took in a deep breath. His head cocked to the side, eyes staring out the window. Something akin to a growl exited his throat before he whipped his head back and continued pacing. I was confused but just slightly relieved that he didn't even glance at me. Part of me wanted to hide, even though I knew hiding was a futile effort. Every sense that a vampire became enhanced once their transformation was complete. Although Nico's transformation was taking longer than I thought it would. The pet master would have already been browsing through the cages and pouncing on whichever pet he felt like taking, perhaps he would have already moved on to the second one. My breathing hitched as I recalled those many memories, now knowing that I was the one that was going to be fed from. Knowing that the possibility of me dying was higher than ever. I soon found myself to begin shaking as well, grip tightening on the pillow. Every pet knows that this time would come for them, but even that can't compare for when it actually happens. Even though I knew that Nico was trying to fight it, him and I both knew that he couldn't fight it forever. Those kinds of predatory instincts run through him like his own blood, only allowing him to fight it for so long until it consumes him. He knew that once it did, he wouldn't have much control over what would happen next. It was the instincts that kept vampires alive no matter what once their species first began to grow. It was a fight that he could never win and he knew it. I knew it. I looked back up to see that Nico had gone almost completely still save for the quick rise and fall of his chest. Not a single muscle in his body was relaxed, like if he showed one sign of weakness he would lose whatever control he had left. His eyes went wide before his entire face contorted in pain. I let out a small gasp as he stumbled forward, catching himself by grabbing onto the wooden frame on the foot of the bed. His grip tightened on the wood, his teeth clenching. I could tell that he was in pain. The schools always taught us that this was a painful process, only making the vampires want to give in to their bloodlust to make it stop faster. I never really understood how one could affect the other, though now that I was actually witnessing it firsthand I understood it plenty. Nico's eyes squeezed shut, his back arching as a sharp hiss of pain passed his lips. I stared, eyes growing wide as two large, dark, leathery wings sprung from his back, effectively ripping through the back of his shirt in the process. I continued to stare in both fear and awe as the wings slowly folded against his back, the ends of them nearly touching the ground. The wings that only appeared during a night like this, or if a vampire's life.